everybody, welcome. We're actually shooting a bunch of podcasts today. This is number 2, and today I've got Bob Donnell here. For those live right now, I hope you're doing awesome and you're having a great Saturday and you get to take away some nuggets out of this. For those listening today, we're broadcasting this live on Facebook, and we're also having just a great chat and hanging out with some amazing people today. So this is the Troy Hoffman Fireside Chats is what we're calling this right now. And what we're trying to do is share information to people out there, because a lot of stuff we just don't know what we just don't know. And we're trying to find ways of getting information out there to you and stories of like true inspiration and true practical application of how to really take your life from where it's at to where you want to go in all 4 areas of body, being, balance, and business. And how do you actually live this crazy ass life that we've got? How do you really take it to the next level? And how do you impact yourself and impact the people around you? So that's what this show is kind of about. It's like, how do we keep getting these messages out that people not only are things taught here, but they're actually truly caught inside people's hearts and their minds and their bodies, so they can take this and truly transform where they're at to where they really want to go. So Bob, thank you for coming in last minute.
Thank you.
I texted Bob last night and I was like, Bob, do you want to do this? We're playing with this. We've never done this before. We're just practicing this and having a great time with this. The show we had before was Greg Johnson. I've known him for over a quarter of a decade, and he just had a chance to hang out with Greg, who was a huge impact on my life when I was younger. And then you came into my life. And then Bob came into my life when I was really at like a peak state of burnout. We have actually Joe Ingram in the room today in the back. And Joe had just telling a story of how he just lost 60 pounds in his life and how he actually transformed his life using techniques of NLP to truly disassociate the fact that he loved ice cream. And those are some of the things we want to share, is like, what are people really doing to create true transformation in their lives? And what's the truth behind the story, where are the factual applications of things? So when I was burnt out, and I've told this story over and over again, because that's just my story I'm sharing, how I built businesses and got totally burnt out. I didn't want to get out of bed. I wasn't motivated anymore. And I met Bob a couple times, and I heard Bob talking in another event that this guy, I think Matt Browning was having, or somebody was having at Matt Browning's office, who's just an exceptional guy that's building churches. He's also doing, he's got his own podcast that he's just killing it on. He teaches great content. He's a dynamic guy with a great family and just a life that he's built is amazing. But I met Bob there, and I remember signing up to do a day with Bob. I was desperate for anything at that point. I was like, how do I get myself out of this funk? I'm tired, I'm burnt out, I'm stressed out of my mind, I'm dealing with so much crap, and I was trying to do everything and anything I could to finally break free out of my own prison. And in episode 1, we talked with Greg about how we go from the dream state to the work state to the prison state in our lives. And I was locked in my prison at that point. And I spent the day with Bob, and Bob was just trying to do anything to break my mind free, because I was so in my own crap. I was so in my own BS stories, and Bob came through to help shatter those stories of that day. He made me ride around in a limo. I was super uncomfortable. I did not want to ride around in a limo. He ran in a limo just to say, so he could show me that there's value to me in my life. And I'm a person of value. And I did not want to receive that. I did not want to accept that. I did not want to be in a limo to save my life. I just hated it. I don't like attention on me that much. I really don't like attention, but I do like sharing a message and giving what I've got inside of me of things I've learned. I spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to learn, to try to give stuff to you and open your mind so you can see the greater potential in your life. So Bob, thank you for that day. I mean, if we go back to that day, why did you choose to work with me? I guess one question, and what is the transformation that you've helped me walk through over the last, I don't even know, 5, 6, 7 years? Time starts disappearing. And the older I get, it just disappears. I'm not even sure exact time frames anymore, but I'd like to share away, man.
Yeah. You know, Troy, you asked an interesting question. Why did I want to work with you? One is, I have, we were just talking about criteria. I have criteria for people that I'm going to work with, personally or professionally, people that are going to be in my life. And one of them is open-minded, and one of the others is coachable. You exemplify both of those on such a huge level in so many different platforms of your life that it made it easy to say yes, that I wanted to work with you, because I have found you to be consistently open-minded and consistently committed to and coachable and these things. And so, you know, when you came and we talked about it, and I remember we met at Starbucks, and then we met at Nectar, and then, you know, then we spent the day together in the limo. And, you know, the whole day of the limo was really designed, like you said, to just break you out of this uncomfortable or this comfortable that you had. You were comfortable being in the shadow. You were comfortable just saying hi and being friendly to everyone and helping everybody, but taking complete focus off of yourself. And so I remember that day, I'm like, what can we do? And I'm like, I'm going to make him ride around in a limo all day long, where every place we go, he's got to get out of a limo, and people's attention's going to be there. And I knew you would just be hating that. And it was a great experience for me to watch that moment for you. But, you know, Troy, you know, the biggest thing that I've witnessed over, you know, 35 years of studying human behavior has been watching people get comfortable into a spot of their life and go into a lull. And I remember when we met, you were talking about being completely burnt out. You were just overweight. You were just completely burnt out in so many areas of your life. And I remember as we talked about it, I kept thinking, you know, here's this guy who's successful. He's a young, good-looking guy. He's got a lot of great things going on in his life, and he's burnt out. And I remember, you know, we had a lot of discussion about that. But one of the coolest things that I remember you sharing with me was your ability to be vulnerable. And I think that vulnerability is really sexy these days. And unfortunately, a lot of people view vulnerability as a weakness. And you and I both know that vulnerability is a strength. And I remember seeing that in you, and I thought, that's a guy I want to get to know better. That's a guy that I want in my inner circle.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been a journey, and I'm thankful because through Bob, I've also had a chance to meet all these exceptional people. For those of you out there that don't know who Bob Donnell is, Bob, when he was really young, started a call center, a crisis hotline for people that are about to commit suicide. And that theme has literally spread out through his entire life. A few days ago, we were in Bob's new office. Is at the airport. I got to see all these private planes, which I want on a private plane one day, I think. I don't know. But it's just the thought of it sounds cool because you have to deal with TSA. And TSA and those long lines at the airport suck. And
but I'm a big believer that it's better to have to have friends with expensive toys than to have expensive toys.
We'll see
so
if we get
you
that
buy
far.
one and I'll enjoy.
We'll see if we ever get that far, but it'd be fun. And we're at Bob's new office, and I asked him this. I was like, how did you choose this life that you've lived? 'Cause I've watched Bob create this amazing life that he doesn't have to work an extreme amount, and he's constantly impacting people's lives. So we actually shot a bunch of video and some recordings on this of so Bob's actually built this crazy life where he actually can make money impacting people's life, but also go and do stuff for free. Like when the shootings happened in Vegas, he was able to actually fly out there and stay out there for days and really just pour into the community at an extremely deep level and have a deep impact on people's lives. And he's done this. And then because he does this and lives this type of life, he's also attracted all these amazing, super high-end people, all different genres of people. Like I got to spend a night having dinner with Elvis's brother one time, which was really kind of interesting, and hear his perspective of what it was like growing up around Elvis and just being around the guy and actually get to know him and even spend time with him afterwards randomly at different places because of Bob. His ability to connect deeply with people and attract all these amazing people in his life has really exposed me to a whole different world of people. Like one night Bob just texted me out of nowhere and he's like, do you want to go to Keith Ferrazzi's house, who wrote this great book called
Who's Got Your Back?
Never Eat Alone. And it was just interesting to hang around with Keith and see how we really interacted with all these people. Not the stage presence again, not the guy in the chair being interviewed, but the guy that's actually, handing food out to people, the guy that's kind of picking up his own trash, the guy's communicating people and looking people in the eye and deeply connecting and actually caring about everybody who they were. And we had the Black Eyed Peas in the room, we had all these different types of people all spread out, like all genres of people too. Yeah. And it was an amazing experience. I've got to meet some really unique people that have, again, this concept of who we get around with pieces of those people get inserted into us. And when Greg was here, I was like, I am part of who I am today is because of who Greg was back then in my life.
Right.
And who I become in the future will be part of who Greg is today as we get around. He's sharing concepts and he's pushing me. So Bob's constantly challenging me. He's constantly pushing me, saying what's next or calling me out on things. Like being super direct and saying, Troy, you can't do this. If you want this result, you can't do this act or talk like this or act like this in some specific area of my life. And Bob's constantly coaching and constantly pouring into people. And so, Bob, I guess one of the questions I have for you is, how do you keep your life inspired? So where you're like, just because what comes out of you has to be inside of you. And then how do you keep the ability going to impact so many people's life and keep that motivation up? And what are you doing? And like, what is your next level? Bob owns a company called The Next Level, and he's got the Next Level entrepreneur group and dinners and all these things that all these really high-end people get to hang out together. So what is your next level, and how do you keep all this going?
Troy, I mean, I think you alluded to it, and my focus is really on how do I continue to pour or be poured into so that I have something to pour out. And so I'm constantly learning. I learn from you. I learn from Joe. I learn from people that I surround myself with because I'm constantly looking to be the next best version of myself. And so my thing is to really surround yourself with great people. And Jim Collins wrote a book, From Good to Great, and in it he says good is the enemy of great. And so when I say, we got some good people, but I want to be surrounded by great people. So really focused on who am I putting into my life intentionally. Jim Rohn said you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most money on. Well, I think you can intentionally create that 5. Most just haven't intentionally done it. Most have said, okay, the 5 people I hang around, my family, the people I work with, the people I went to school with, people I went to college with, those are my 5. Well, great, but maybe you need a new 5. And so I say, what do we create an intentional peer group? That's why we created Next Level by Association. And so I've been really intentional about who am I putting into my life, and then sharpening that saw by letting them speak into my life. And you mentioned it, but I think one of the things that I've noticed about you is that coachability and that vulnerability. And I have to be the same way. I mean, I'm constantly saying, who are the people in my life that I give permission to speak to me without me having to tell them it's okay to give me feedback. Like, I don't give unsolicited advice. I hate unsolicited advice given to me, and I hate to give it to somebody else. Yeah. So I'm really big on saying, do I have permission to share with you something? Unless they're a coaching client. Coaching clients, they've already given me permission, so I do it, right? Yeah. But I'm really big on surrounding myself with people that have permission to speak to me in whatever language and in whatever method they need to do to reach me.
Out of curiosity, like, who's spoken to you in the last 3 to 6 months of something that's impacted you, like where you're like, holy crap, they nailed me on this, or it's really created a shift in my life? Like, who's really dropped some words or spoken to you or challenged you? And
wow.
What was that specifically, out of curiosity?
Oh boy. I mean, I can think of a couple of weeks ago, Wesley Gu and I, who's a
Wesley's an amazing guy.
Wes, Wes and I were having a conversation, and I said something, and he says, "Do you mean that?" And I went, "Well, yeah." And he goes, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah, but why are you questioning it?" And he goes, "Because if you mean that, this wouldn't have been said earlier." And I went, And what he had done was he had caught my language. And my language was saying one thing, and it was saying the same thing here, but it wasn't connecting. And so he was like, if this is really true, then what about this? And I remember thinking, wow, he was listening to the language. And I think that was really important. But I think, like Joe, or even Flo, who's here, they're both mindful enough to say, if I'm not being congruent with my behavior or my attitude, they're both willing to say, well, what's that all about?
They're calling you out on your BS.
Yeah, they're willing to say.
I have people across every area of my life constantly doing this to me. Yeah. Like, it's great because you're like, oh, shoot.
Right.
Like, I can't believe I'm doing this, or yes, I know I suck in this area. Like, I've got to improve. Like literally all the time. Like you do it. I mean,
Right.
Joe will call me out or bring up
Right.
something or whoever in my life, especially at work. Like I've got Scott DeLong in my life constantly telling me everything I'm doing wrong. And I mean, literally all these different coaches and people that I surround myself with, because I do not want to live in that pit anymore.
Yeah.
I do not want to screw my life up anymore. I don't want to live with a bunch of regrets of pain and things I've screwed up, because I've literally screwed up so much, and I'm tired of screwing up. And that's kind of one of the reasons I'm learning all this, because I want to get out of my own funk. I don't want to deal with body issues. I don't want to deal with my mental state being fried or anything. I don't want to deal with relationships not working or my business not working. So constantly getting around these people, I mean, you did it 3 days ago or 4 days ago, nailed me on something. You know, specifically, and called me out and like, hey, you don't want to do this, you don't want to say this, you don't want to say, I'm just doing all this for free, right? And you're like, no, I'm personally going to sell coaching and sell courses that are going to impact lives, and that's kind of one of the goals I have. And then really, so I can truly give away great content and get people and truly create deep transformation and help others like I've been helped by people like you. You know?
Yeah, you know, I think that's a really important thing, because as people who want to impact people's lives, we have to realize that there's a value in it. There's two things I want to share about that. One is there was a great movie called Moneyball with Brad Pitt.
Yeah, that was a great movie.
And there's one scene in it where Jonah Hill and Brad are having a conversation, and Brad is thinking about this opportunity that he has to go with another team and everything, and Jonah Hill's like, why aren't you doing that? That's a lot of money. And Brad says something, and I'm paraphrasing, but Brad says something, yeah, but you know, it's not about the money for me. And Jonah Hill makes a great statement. He says, you're right, it's not about the money. It's about what the money says, and it says you're worth it.
Correct.
And I love that line, because I think a lot of times we get hung up with that thought that, you know, charging for our services, charging for our experience. I mean, you mentioned that you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Easily.
I
Easily.
would venture it's close to $1 million.
Easily.
You spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of
maybe over $1
dollars to
million.
be who you are today,
Correct.
right now. And so that's a price you've paid. And that price was heavy. And to give that away is inexcusable.
Correct.
Unless you're doing it out of a contribution standpoint, right? But if all you are is a contribution, then I say file a 501c3 and at least take the tax breaks.
Correct.
Right? But if you're running a business, then you have the opportunity to charge, but also you have an opportunity to do it for free. You're right, I do charge. I charge $5,000 for that day that we spent together.
Correct.
I charge $5,000. Why? Because there are times when I'm going to give it away. I'm going to give time
Correct.
away. And so I want to be able to do that. But if I'm doing everything for free and I don't have a 501c3, then
And the other side of that
I'm
too
hurt.
is I feel like if I don't pay for something, I don't value it. And I
Amen.
feel like if we give too much away for free, people just like don't do anything with it. But when you're
Right.
paying for something, you're like, I paid for this. I put
Yes.
time, sweat, and equity of my life. I'm going to do something with this.
Yeah.
And whatever that motivation is, like money is a great motivation to say, I'm going to do something with my life. Like I'm going to invest in this. I'm going to invest to create a more robust life, whatever that is.
Yep.
And everyone's got a different goal, a different
Right.
dream, a different thing that they're going to build, that whatever comes out of them. But for me, I knew that I've got to go to this next level if I'm going to have more of a greater impact. So by me investing in myself, I invest a lot.
Well, you haven't just invested money. You've invested a lot of time. I mean, I
Correct.
remember you telling me that you were like driving people around as their chauffeur, you know, these
Correct.
speakers and things like that. You weren't getting paid for that. You were doing it for free. So you were investing not only time, not only money, but you're investing time.
Correct.
And, you know, I think you hit on a great point. There was a point about
I
8
drove
years-
you. I volunteered to drive
you
you around
volunteered
for a
to drive me
while.
out to Claudia
Yeah.
Cooley's thing. Yeah,
Correct.
that's right. And we had a great time. But you know, like 8 or 9 years ago, no, about 10 years ago, I guess, I was living on my boat in Marina del Rey. And I would walk down to the Starbucks every day, and it was right down there. And I remember I would see these guys all hanging out, and there was this one guy, and he was a pretty young guy, you know, maybe 28, 29, 30, something like that. And he was working there, and he would just be hanging out with his buddies and stuff, and then he'd leave, and one day I come walking up and he goes, Bob, right? And I go, right. And he goes, hey, you know, don't you do like coaching or something? And I go, well, I mean, I have a small percentage of my business that is derived from coaching, but yeah, why do you ask? He says, you know, I'm an architect. My company closed down. I've been without a job. That's why you see me here every day hanging out. And he's got a little dog, and he goes, I said, where do you live? And he goes, right there. And he points to a car. He goes, I live in my car. And I go, for all this time you've been living in your car? And he goes, yeah, several months. And I said, oh, and he goes, and I just wondered, could you spend some time coaching me? What do you charge? And I go, well, I'm $2,500 for 4 hours. And he goes, oh, I can't afford that. And I go, I get it. And he says, so do you have, for what about an hour? And I go, well, take 25 divided by 4, but I don't do typically 1 hour. And he goes, there's just no way I can afford that. And I go, all right. I said, how serious are you? He goes, I'm serious. I got to do something pretty quick. And I go, all right, I'm going to go in and get my iced tea. When I come out, how much money do you have? And he goes, I've got like $250 left right now. That's all I got. And I go, I'm going to go in and get my coffee or my iced tea, come out. You tell me how much of that $250 you're willing to spend for an hour. And he goes, all right. I figured $40. I'm thinking, I just gave him an open end. I walked down and he goes, I'll give you 125 of it right now. I think it was 120. And I said, all right. So I said, when do you want to do it? He goes, I want to do it now. So I said, okay. So we spent an hour together. And then what I did was I said, tomorrow morning, here's your homework. Tomorrow morning, I want to meet up here for coffee. Mm-hmm. We'll spend some time together. And he came back, we met, and then I gave him some additional things during the course of the next week. Well, then I left my boat and I moved back to the valley, and I never really even followed up with the guy. About 2 years later, I go into that same Starbucks in Marina Del Rey, and he goes, hey, Bob. And I go, what are you doing here? He goes, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe what's happened. I go, what happened? He goes, well, after that period of time, he goes, I did what you told me to do. I stopped hanging out in Starbucks and just hanging out with my buddies. I started doing this and doing that. He says, I went and visited my sister in England. He goes, while I was there, I said, you know what, I'm gonna follow up. I'm gonna start doing what Bob told me to do. I'm gonna start reaching out, making connections the way Bob taught me to do it. He goes, he did that. He got a job in England, moved to England. He goes, Bob, I am working for such an awesome company. And he goes, my life has just completely changed. He says, what are you doing here? He says, wow. I had to come up to finish a few things. Wow. And I remember being asked, Bob, what possessed you to charge a homeless person for coaching? And I said, because he needed it.
Correct.
He needed to be charged that. He had sat for so long in a Starbucks, correct, talking to his buddies about how bad life was or all the things. He needed something to jar him out of that. And sometimes the cost can be a jarring move for somebody. Correct. So I love that from the standpoint of we have to be willing to jar people in whatever way it is. There's times when I use certain language to move somebody off the dime. Correct. Right? It might be a simple slap like that just wakes somebody up out of their trance or whatever it is that we're all living in. Or it might be something that I use a certain type of language that does that. And I think that that's one of the things that I see a lot of us struggle with, especially when we go into business, is we don't know what it's going to take to move somebody. And as a coach or as a speaker, we have to be willing to be an entrepreneur. Or as an entrepreneur.
Trying to charge for your services.
Right.
Correctly.
We have to be willing to be uncomfortable.
We devalue ourselves Absolutely. So much. And I love it that you tell that story, because I can think of times in my life specifically where I had to do that. Yeah. Literally everything left I had because I didn't know what to do, and I just needed somewhere a breakthrough to occur. Right. And that happened to me with Scott Duffy one day. And I was just like, the company finances were like going red, and we don't get paid for 6 months to a year on our cases. Right. We do all this work, we put all this time, put all this money, and sometimes we don't get money for a while. And then as you're scaling and growing a company, you just don't have finances. As you're growing, cash flow is a big issue in everyone's life when you're growing companies. So I literally, Scott goes, well, it's $2,500 or something like that, or $5,000. I was like, Scott, I've got $1,187 left in my account. I will get, between my personal and professional, I've been in this spot over and over and over again in my life. And I literally gave it to Scott, and I was like, let's sit down and come up with a plan. And he, just a few things, we went through this master plan of just breakthrough that occurred that day. I was able to take action on and be able to keep the company growing. Yeah. Because there's always these walls that we're hitting in our lives, and they're self-induced a lot of time. Yep. It's the way we see things, the way we're acting, the way we're taking action on things.
The questions we're asking.
Yeah, the questions we're even asking ourselves are the wrong questions. And if it wasn't for Scott coming in from a different angle with a different energy, and his experience too. Like, he'd been in the same boat with a company that I think it was like one of the companies that was semi-associated with him and Richard Branson, and another one before that, where he had to lay off about 50 people and stuff like that. So it was these lessons from people that have actually been through it, and then you can actually pick up a piece from them, are huge. And I've been there so many times, and the even better part of this, in that example, is I actually know like some of these extremely successful people. One of my friends, Garrett J. White, who created the Wake Up Warrior thing, he was literally, do I make my mortgage payment and feed my family, or do I spend this last bit of money I have to go to this seminar?
Wow.
And if he didn't go to that seminar, he would not have been impacting tens of thousands of lives today. And he's changed his life drastically because he gave his last dollar to go to something that jarred him, that moved him, that made him take massive action in his life, change his mindset, change his skill set, so he could actually move his life and his family's life massively forward because he was willing to risk it all. And then because of that moment, and a lot of people do need that. And the question is, where are we devaluing ourselves, our services, our impact that we can have with our businesses, with our family? I mean, we devalue ourselves. And then where in your life actually do you need to spend money or do something extreme to take you to where you are now, to really where you want to go?
Yeah.
And so,
you know, the story, the thing that you said about that story, the thing I love about Garrett in that story is that it wasn't just the price. It wasn't just the money he had to pay. He had to literally go home and explain to his wife that, hey, look, I know we need money. I know we need rent, but I got to do this. So he's going to have to go home and, you know, deal with that as well.
Correct.
So it wasn't just the money.
Price.
It's what everything else that evolves
the family,
around
the look
that.
in his wife, the
look in his
disappointment
wife,
she
where they
has.
go, you know, I mean, who's to say that maybe she was a wonderful woman and never had this doubts, but maybe she began to doubt him at some point. I mean, what was it that possessed him enough to say, I must, as our friend said.
Greg Johnson says.
I love that. So what was it possessed him to say, I must do this, even in face of losing respect for my wife or losing, you know, whatever it is, losing sleep.
He listened to the voice, not reason. And whatever that voice is inside of it that speaks to us at different moments, that doesn't make sense in the reality of the world we're living in that moment, but some voice, wherever it comes from, wherever you want to say it, shows up, and when the voice speaks, you got to say, okay, it's time to move.
Yeah.
And he moved, and I like the example too of like the price you pay at home, because there's a guy by the name of Peter J. Daniels. I had the awesome opportunity of being a chauffeur for him, especially for 3 days of my life.
Wow. 3 days. That's cool.
Truly transformational. Because this guy, like, literally couldn't read. He couldn't write. He was a bricklayer in Australia, gets saved at the Billy Graham crusade, and commits to wanting to give away more money than anybody else and have this massive impact. But the guy started with literally nothing, no education. It was like 3rd grade he made it to. And because this moment occurred where something collided with him, collision always must occur to knock an object off course and redirect it. So either we collide verbally, we collide with money, we collide with energy, whatever it is, but that collision knocked him off course and sent him on a new course. But he had to sacrifice spending time and money he was making to buy the books, to pay for the education, to go to the seminars. And his wife was not believing him in that moment. She's like, you're taking away from my kids' shoes?
Right.
You're taking away from my kids' food? From income that we could be using for this family? And he tells a story, but he also says this. He said, if I didn't take that money and dump it into my head, I would not be one of the 3rd richest guys in Australia. Went from nothing to the 3rd richest guy because he stopped spending money on these and spent it on this. And we invest so much in other areas of our life. We blow money on so many freaking movies and popcorn and going to do crap and drinks, but we're not pouring it here that's going to create the true breakthrough that really sets us free. And that lesson I learned when I was maybe 21. And we're at a fine dining restaurant. Like a fine dining restaurant. It was me, Larry Linkus, and Aaron Mainers. And he puts his foot on the table with his wife sitting there. And he goes, never spend more on these than you do on this.
Love that.
And because of that investment, it took him to this life where he got to work with Nelson Mandela, and he got to work with world leaders and world banks, and really understand economics at a level that few people ever get to experience. And not only that, he made a decision to travel for free on his dime and speak at churches and community groups all across America to pay America back for what it gave to him.
Wow. That's cool.
And that's this impact. So the question is, we should probably wrap this up today, but where in your life do you need to have collision occur? Where in your life do you need to spend the money to break you out of whatever you're in? Where in your life do you need to invest energy or time or money or get around people that are going to collide with you and take you off the course you're on into this new course? And that is a question we're going to leave here today, is what do you need to do to transform your life to impact not only you, but the people around you, not only for the short term, but for the rest of your life. So Bob, thank you so much. Any closing words you want to wrap up with? You got today?
Find great people in your life and surround yourself with them, and then do everything you can to shut up and listen.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. And you are an amazing gentleman, an amazing friend.
Thank you, Bob.
I appreciate you very much.
Love you, man. Thank you for being on the show. And thank you, everyone, for watching today. These podcasts will be going live, and we'll be getting more great stuff out to you. So we'll see you on the next show.